still have people watching.
Well, hello there. What's happening, Bean? You know, I'm supposed to be talking.
Mr. Mack,
We are live to the world from the UK, and there's a lot of people commenting already. So hi to everyone who's already joined us. You join us in the middle of a YouTube emergency. Really, can you give us an update on what's happening at the moment, Bean?
I'm going to tell you. Whoa, hold on a sec. Okay, Graham, this is weird because there was a delay, and then the YouTube page, I started hearing that in my headphones at the same time.
Okay, right. So that is going to confuse you. Yeah, that's going to confuse you. Yeah.
I'll bring that back up and mute it so we can see the comments in a little bit. All right, here's the emergency, and you're going to love this, Graham. This is so funny. Allie bought a new computer. Allie, my co-host on A Cup of Tea and a Chat, the podcast that we're going to be speaking about. She bought a new computer a few weeks ago because hers was like a 2013. It was barely able to hold a charge. It was really
That's
starting
the Jurassic period of computers, I think. 2013.
Exactly. Yeah. And you know how there's planned obsolescence. They don't invent them to last forever. It's not like when you and I were kids when you could buy a car and drive it for 20 years, Graham. It's not like that.
Never had this problem with Etch-a-Sketch. Yeah.
So she bought this computer, and then we had this listener who called in and said, Allie, I don't know what you're thinking. Everyone knows you don't buy any new equipment, machinery, particularly computers, anything complicated, when Mercury is in retrograde. When you do that, you're inviting trouble. So he said, yeah, right. Good luck with your medication, right? So we just laughed it off. Ever since then, this is a brand new, like 2021 MacBook Pro. Ever since then, she gets dumped off of Zoom meetings. The thing just closes down, like every possible thing that can go wrong. And I'm telling you, she was nervous about doing this today because she knew it was going to be live, right? So she wanted to make sure she was ready. She prepped this thing. She was doing all sorts of like additional Zoom calls and things like that yesterday to make sure everything was going to work. And then immediately, right before we went on tonight, the whole thing just collapsed again. I'm telling you that she owes an apology to that Mercury in retrograde lady. It turns out she knew what she was talking about.
So what is the situation right now? What's the latest information you have from Allie, who's in, we should say, you're in London. I'm about 30 miles north of London in a place called Hitchin, and Allie's in Los Angeles.
That's right.
Yeah. So really, we've managed to connect up 30 miles.
We could have done this anytime, right?
Yeah.
I could have driven to your house in the amount of time it's taken to get Allie on here.
Yeah.
I assume she's restarting her computer because I'm not hearing anything from her on the chat right now.
Aha.
So I think she'll get in. I think she'll try. I apologize. And the comedy really is that the only reason I'm wearing a dumb hat and I have braids is because she was so excited about what she was wearing that she sent me a photo like a half an hour ago and said, oh, look at these beautiful braids I have for the interview with Graham. And Donna, my wife, thought it would be so funny if I showed up with the same look. But now that she's not on the screen, I just look like a cross-dresser.
I'm so glad you've explained that, because people who aren't used to seeing you, I'm used to seeing you, so I know that this is not normal. But people who aren't used to seeing you are going, did you see that guy's hair?
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, they're saying, I know lockdown has been going on a long time in the UK, but seriously, how much does the dude's hair grow? But so the joke is completely ruined because Allie's not here to make it obvious why I have mirrored her image. So that's what's going on here. So
okay. So do we have any news from Allie at all?
Not a word.
Okay.
Not a word.
Okay.
The last thing we got from her was WTF?
Yes.
Question mark, question mark, question mark. And as we learned from an episode of Modern Family, that means why the face?
That's right. Yeah.
That's what they said. Why the face? So how are you, Graham? I guess it's just us boys now.
Just us boys. Oh, hello. Hello. I see guest is in green room.
Okay.
But I see there's a line through the microphone logo. So that means, Allie, you need to do something to bring your microphone online. So, mind you, she might even be able to hear me. Mm-hmm. I can see a grey picture of you, Allie, but there is a line through the little microphone logo. In fact, I'm going to put you live now. So there you are. See,
Hello.
And now we can even hear you.
I kept saying, "Can you hear me? I can hear you."
I see.
I like my hair in the gray picture. If we could leave that up.
You like?
Yeah, she looks great.
But do you see? Have you seen Bean? Have you seen his?
Hi, Bean. What are you doing? You and Donna are the most amazing human beings ever. You did the bubble braids, the
I
inverted
sure did.
bubble braids.
But
Yeah.
I was explaining to Graham that the joke was completely lost because people couldn't see you, so I just looked like a crazy man.
You look
The whole
nuts.
point was we were going to be twinsies, but without you, I'm just thing two.
I wish you could have seen the last 5 minutes. By the way, my computer, my new computer, right near my hand.
Right.
My old computer up here. My phone trying to get my passwords from my old computer to even get on Wi-Fi because I changed a router last week. Hi guys.
I explained to Graham that you brought this
Yeah.
on yourself because of the whole Mercury in retrograde thing, and now it turns out that lady was 100% on track.
I actually threw out my eyeball sockets, rolling them at that woman that was like, oh
Right.
no, you can't buy anything. She was right. I should never have bought this during Mercury in retrograde. Should never have done it.
Who was this?
apologize
Who
to you,
can we name names on this person?
I'd have
don't
to
remember.
look her up, but she was a listener that literally the second I said, I just bought a new computer, she's like, oh, during Mercury in retrograde, nothing will go well. And I was like, all right, cuckoo. Now
Okay.
she's
Can I
right.
say, and we've all had this feeling, it's always fun when friends that you have separately get to meet each other. This is really fun for me because I have this whole long relationship with Graham and this whole long relationship with Allie. And now I feel like you guys know each other. And it's fun to, especially in COVID times, it's so nice to be able to expand our bubble a little bit and invite a few more people in, even if it's only virtually.
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you, Allie. It's so good. I mean, I've listened to you
So
on the
nice to
podcast. You
meet
sound
you.
great. And of course, there's the KROQ days. For anyone who's just joining us, who doesn't know what this is all about, I'm Graham Mack. I present a show on Podcast Radio, which is a chart show of podcasts. So I interview podcasters. And a couple of people who I've wanted to talk to for a little while now are Jean Bean Baxter and Allie McKay. The podcast is called A Cup of Tea and a Chat. And I even brought a cup of tea, if that helps. So at least we've got
Well,
the cup of... okay.
Oh, all right. Who's a trashy American?
Okay.
I'm
Diet
kicking myself
Mountain
right
Dew,
now,
what's-
Graham, because I had the opportunity to hold up a branded cup. We have merch.
You have
and
merch, yes.
The cup of tea and a chat teacups are very, very popular. And like an idiot, I didn't pour my tea in that. I could have held it up right now and maybe sold a couple. But instead, here I am with my hairdresser's just arrived to take my braids out now that Allie has seen
I
them.
was hoping someone would.
Yes.
Okay, so just to let you know who we're talking to,
Oh,
Gene
so
Bean
good.
Baxter is a Radio Hall of Famer. He ruled the airwaves in Los Angeles for almost 30 years on the world-famous KROQ with Kevin in the show Kevin and Bean. Allie Mack has done all sorts of things. Actress, TV presenter on KTLA. She also joined Bean and Kevin on the Kevin and Bean show, and now she joined Bean for a cup of tea and a chat, and she joins us now because what we're doing is we're recording a piece that will be various interviews to use on the radio show, just so you know what this is all about. But people like, I do these live, so people like to see the behind the scenes, the completely uncut version. And it is great to have you on.
I am so glad that you included actress in Allie's CV because I want her to tell you about some of her great work that she's done,
Yes.
including playing perky presenter in a Paul Feig film, which I think is really her greatest cinema highlight.
It was my breakout role. Thank you, Bean, for mentioning that. Yeah, perky presenter was what I was called in the credits. And I was up on a screen in a movie called Unaccompanied Minors, where these kids wind up stranded at an airport. It's the first year their parents have gotten a divorce, so they have to fly during Christmas to one of the parents' house. Big snowstorm ensues. I don't have to tell you how it ends, but a lot of murder.
Lewis Black was in
No,
that,
just
wasn't he?
kidding. It's
Wasn't
very
Lewis
sweet.
Black in
Yes,
that?
he was.
Was he good to work with?
Kristen
Because he looks like
Wiig.
he's about to explode all the time.
We have had Lewis Black on Kevin and Bean. I think you guys have had him hundreds of times. And yeah, he
he's
could
great.
explode at any moment, but he's so dang funny.
Yeah.
So funny. And I didn't work with anyone. I was literally just up on a TV screen and that was it. But I get a check every Christmas. It's not a movie about murder, by the way. I need to be very clear. There's no murder in it. It's a lovely film during the holidays. And that concludes my movie roles. Thank you for bringing it up.
Well, we'll get to more stuff you did. Now, I should go back to when I first heard you, Bean, and this is kind of surreal for me, although I know you now as well. When I first got into radio, it was 1993, and I was working at a tiny little station in Australia, 5 hours drive west of Sydney in a town called Parkes. And I worked on the air at Hits and Memories 2PK. It was my first radio gig. And so I sent off to learn about radio, and there was a thing, you'll remember it, called California Air Check.
Sure, yeah.
A guy called George Jernak used to record American radio shows and telescope the air checks, meaning he cut all the songs out, or as my wife is concerned, cut all the good bits out. And and then I would listen to them, and often the ones they would send me were Kevin and Bean on the world-famous KROQ. So to actually be like on the air with you now is a real kick. So yeah,
You've never told me that story before.
Because I couldn't pick up any Los Angeles radio stations in Australia.
Sure.
No internet
by the
back
way,
then. Yeah.
I was a colossal radio geek, as you know. I spent a lot of money buying stuff from California Air Checks my own self, especially to hear disc jockeys in places like Los Angeles that were so far away from where I live. Because remember, kids, pre-internet, there was no way to get this stuff.
Just no way. Yeah.
And I used to fly when I would go someplace on vacation. If I'd go to Chicago for a week or something like that, I'd be running back and forth to the hotel every 90 minutes to turn over or put in another cassette so that I could just continue rolling tape on as much radio as I could get while I was in that city to listen to when I got back home. I mean, that's the only thing we had back then. So
yeah,
that's so cool, Graham. When you mentioned Parkes, is that the place where the big satellite dish is?
That is where the TV pictures of Neil Armstrong walking on the moon, they came through the dish in Parkes. There's a great Australian movie called The Dish, if you ever get to see it, which is set in Parkes in 1969. But Parkes is exactly the same. The Parkes I lived and worked in was exactly right down to the mayor being exactly the same as in that movie. Yeah.
Look how excited Bean is to
I'm
talk
so
about
excited
anything
because
space.
That's the only reason I know of Parkes is because of The Dish.
Yeah.
Is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Parkes is exactly like that.
Have you seen The Dish?
You brought this up on Kevin and Bean, and then I pretended the whole time you were talking about the movie Soap Dish, and you got so mad at me. Do you remember that? You're like, leave me alone. Stop talking about stupid stuff.
No, it's a great film. It's a town of 9,500 people in a market of 33,000 people. And although the market only has 33,000 people, the market is the size of Wales. Because that's Australia.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's Australia for you. Yeah.
Have you done more radio in England or more radio in Australia?
More in the UK. I started in 93 in Australia, and I left Australia in 97. I worked for 3 stations. I worked for 2PK, then I went to South Australia, different state, at 5SC Mount Gambier, did breakfast there, and then ended up on the East Coast, just north of Sydney, the Central Coast, worked at 2GO, and then came to the UK in 97. So most of my
radio. Did you ever think
about
moving back to Australia once they beat the COVID and they've been wide open down there for like 6 months already?
Well, I nearly went there, just before the lockdown and everything. My wife and I went to New Zealand because Julie's from New Zealand, and we were due to go to Sydney on the way home, and we weren't allowed in because of the restrictions. So, I don't know if I'd go, it's a great country, Australia. It's great. But you've traveled around too, haven't you, Bean? You were born in the UK, but then how old were you when you went to the USA? 15?
I was only 15 when we technically I lived there earlier than that because we lived in Hawaii for a few years. My dad was in the service. He was a U.S. Navy officer, and he met what his family from North Carolina referred to as his war bride when he met and married my mother here in London. And they lived all over the world like people in the service do. We lived in the Philippines, and we lived in Spain, and we lived in Hawaii. And eventually he retired and went to work for the Department of Defense in the Washington, D.C. area. So that was really my first mainland U.S. experience. And that's where I got started in radio and lived until I moved west in the late 80s.
Late 80s? You didn't get to KROQ till what, about 1990?
1990. That's right. Yeah, Kevin and I started on January 2nd, 1990. We kicked off the decade with a new job, and then I left there in November of 2019. So just a few weeks short of exactly 30 years.
And Allie, you grew up in Los Angeles, but you went to college on the other coast. Must have been a bit of a culture shock.
Well, my parents are both from Boston, and they moved to LA in the late 60s for what they thought was going to be 3 years, and they stayed till 2008. But every year we would see all my relatives in Massachusetts and then up in Maine. So I knew both coasts really well, spent every summer in Maine. So going to Boston College, BC, was not out of the norm for me, but learned quickly that I am a California kid. I'm an LA girl because I was cold. I was not aware that if you leave the house with it wet, that it will freeze. Things that most people learn very early in life. For me, I was like, what is happening to my hair, you guys? And people were like, it's what happens when the weather is freezing. So it was a fun experience, though. I would recommend anyone go to college away from where you're from and learn all new stuff with all new people.
So how did you end up back in LA and on KTLA, the TV station?
I had been working all around the country, from Salt Lake City, Sacramento,
in
New
TV?
York City, in TV. And it's the same thing with radio. You kind of keep moving up in markets until you get where you want to spend the rest of your life or a big chunk of time. And I was currently in Park City, Utah, and flying back and forth to New York to do stuff with random Fox News Channel and Good Morning America, doing like random little segments for both of those networks. And then I got a phone call from KTLA, which was the show I grew up watching in Los Angeles on Channel 5. And would you ever consider moving back to LA? And I was like, tomorrow? Let's do this. And shockingly, Graham, I know it'll be weird to hear this, but my parents moved 2 months later back to Boston and then up to Maine. It's like they were waiting for me to come home. Then they're like, "Oh, welcome home. We are out."
So you were well, we've got something in common then. I was abandoned too. I was at the age of 18. My family, my parents and my sister, emigrated to New Zealand from the UK. We grew up in the northwest, just outside Liverpool. And we emigrated to New Zealand when I was 18. When I was 21, they came back to Britain and decided New Zealand wasn't for them. And I stayed in New Zealand. So I was abandoned on the other side of the world. Yeah.
Okay, I don't feel as bad now. That's awful. But at least they told you.
No, trust me, I
going,
wanted to
right?
go. I wanted to.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to stay there and then not long after I met Julie and my life changed. And I was a pipe fitter on an oil refinery construction site back then. And yeah, it was very different life. I didn't get into radio until we moved to Australia. So how did you get onto KROQ then? From TV? Isn't radio a step down?
I'll say. No, not at all. I don't even know if Bean will remember this, but I was doing a segment on glass blowing, and they had a TV, I guess, in the studio at Kevin and Bean. And I guess during the segment, they were transfixed with this reporter that was saying highly inappropriate things while glass blowing. So they had me on about a week later, because I was fairly new to KTLA, and they had me on a week later, and they said, "Where are you live at this morning?" Because I was at a different place every morning. And I said, "Oh, I'm live at Pussy and Pooch today." And it was a place that, it's for dogs and cats. And they're
of course.
Like, "What are you doing? Everything about you is wrong and inappropriate." So anytime I did anything that they deemed weird or inappropriate, they would have me back on the air. And then Ralph Garman wound up taking, he was the entertainment showbiz guy, did a ton of their voices. He wound up taking some time off, and they said, "Would you ever want to just fill in, do some mornings with us?" And I was like, okay. But Bean doesn't like to hear this. Cover your ears, Bean. But I used to listen to them on the way to school. And my mom would be like, "No, I want to listen to KROQ 101. And I'm like, "No, Kevin and Bean." So it was quite the coup to be able to work with the two of them. Very cool stuff.
And Los Angeles, the entertainment capital in the world. What was it like for both of you waking up that city every morning? Must have been such a thrill.
Yeah, Bean was lucky because he got to sleep in a little bit. When I did TV, I was up at 2:30 Monday through Friday. We had to do our own hair, own makeup, and then head out to wherever our live shots were. Then I got to Kevin and Bean, and I was like, I get to sleep until 3:45. This is amazing. But Bean did the right thing very early, and he left LA and worked from home. Right, Bean?
Yeah. I was only in Los Angeles for the first 9.5 years of our run there. And then I lived up in Seattle for 15 or 16 years and then lived in New Orleans for the last 4 years. And New Orleans was the smartest move I ever made because it's 2 hours ahead. So I'm living in the central time zone. I'm going on the air at 7:30 a.m., which is pretty sweet for a morning show, right?
Yeah.
But to answer your question, Graham, and I've been lucky enough to work in a number of markets in America, Washington, D.C., and Phoenix, and San Francisco, and Los Angeles, and Baltimore, Maryland. Being in radio, it's the same everywhere, honestly. I mean, Los Angeles felt local because, I lived there and we did the show, obviously, and I, knew the layout of the city, but it didn't really feel that much different than doing radio in any other city. It's just that it was great for us to have access to so many more celebrities. That was the one real advantage of being in Los Angeles, is because that's where a majority of people in the entertainment industry are. So we really were able to take advantage of that, which I was grateful for. But other than that, it's an industry town, but there's also a lot more going on than just show business too. So, I mean, you just look for stuff to do like you would in any market. I mean, you could go to any market and find something interesting and find interesting people to talk to. So that's what we did.
Well, you were there a lot longer than Allie, but I want to get one highlight from KROQ from both of you before we move on. Can I start with you, Allie? Highlight of your time at KROQ?
Oh, March 16th, 2020. No, just kidding. That's when we were fired over the phone during a pandemic.
We can get to that too later, I'm sure.
No. You know what? There were lovely times. Absolutely. Anytime that you got an email from a listener saying that they were going through something, whether it was something in their personal life, a lot of, people that were in the hospital or that were going through cancer and would say, I turned you guys on and my day turned around. That is all that mattered, because if you realize that you're doing this job and you're affecting even one person, making their day a little bit better, that was a highlight for me. Absolutely.
You still get that with the podcast, don't you? I heard one the other day. There was a lady who'd lost his wife and said that you guys were so important.
Yeah. It is. We're not worthy of it. We're a couple of idiots. And then you add the Kevin and Bean show, a lot of idiots, but it changes people and they get used to seeing the same people or hearing the same people day in and day out. And it becomes such a unique thing because that's becomes almost a family member, because where they're going to be the same time every day. You're going to get a laugh, maybe learn something, so it's a very beautiful thing that we were able to do.
And Bean?
There were so many great moments of just pinch me, I can't believe I get to do this. You're standing in a room the size of this tiny room that I'm in right now, and Metallica is playing in front of you. I mean, those sorts of things just feel like I've won the lottery, right? But I think ultimately, I'm going to piggyback on what Allie said. It's really the sense of community that you get from the listeners. Radio, as you know, Graham, you've done it a long time, is just such a deeply personal and intimate medium. And it's just so unbelievably gratifying. It's easy to be in a room talking to your friends, or be in a room, as I have been most of my career, by myself in a room and just talking into the ether. But once you realize that your words are being heard and they are affecting people, it's just magic. It's absolutely magic. And, when Allie and I started this podcast, we had no idea if anyone would care. I mean, she'd been off the radio for 6 months. I'd been off the radio for, I don't know how long it was, 10 months, 9 months, whatever it was. And, we had no expectations. We didn't know if we were going to get 30 subscribers or 300 subscribers. We certainly didn't expect to get over 5,000 subscribers within the first couple of months. I mean, honestly, it absolutely just blew us away. And we get messages all the time from people who tell us that we are really a significant part of their week. And it's just a tremendous honor. It really is not, it's not something we ever take for granted. And now more than ever, because they're paying our salaries. We work for them. This is even another step beyond. Hello. What's happening? You guys hear that?
I just had an idea. Yeah, it was me having an idea. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing when you're working at a radio station and somebody else is paying you to entertain the masses, but now our listeners are paying us to entertain them. So it even feels more intimate than it ever has. And it's just, you can't, I'm not even doing a sufficient job of explaining how meaningful it is to us and how deeply we are grateful for it. But it's really special. It's really, really special. And, at this time of my life, there are a lot of people who aren't working, who can't, especially in our industry. Radio in the UK and radio in the US has shed, what would you estimate, Graham? More than 50% of its on-air
more than
in the last few years, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that we're able to do anything, still get to get up and just make each other laugh, and it falls on ears of people who enjoy it, we're just super grateful for.
And it's only 3 days a week. What's the reason for that?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I was saying. When we started this podcast, we didn't have any expectations, but we also wanted to every decision that we made, we just had to make it up, just decide on something. So we thought that would be a good way to start and see how it felt. We felt like 5 days a week seemed like a lot of work. For folks who haven't heard our show, it's very production heavy. There's a lot of audio. There are a lot of segments. We talk to our listeners. We have phone calls. We have a bunch of stuff that's going on, and it's time consuming to put that together. And I think we'd rather it ends up being about 3.5 hours of content a week. I think we'd rather do it 3 days a week and have the time to spend on it to make it really good than do 5 and have it feel bloated or not be prepared for it. So that we started it 3 days a week just to see how it felt. And I think I speak for Allie when I say it feels about right. It seems like that's where we need to be.
I love the 3 days a week for all the reasons that being said, but also I feel like with more days, anybody that falls behind there's like this anxiety that happens, like, oh no, I'm behind in the podcast. I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. And we have found, even when we put out a bonus podcast, because for a couple of the different tiers that we have, we do a bonus podcast each month. When we put that out, people are like, too much content. You got to slow down.
It's funny. I went to one of those radio seminars in the US. Well, I can't remember if it was a talk show boot camp or a morning show boot camp or one of those. And they had a guy from Arbitron there, and he was looking at the information they were getting from the people meters. And they found that the P1s to a morning show in the US, they don't listen every day, which for radio people is kind of shocking. And they only listen to about 3 shows a week anyway. So I think
I think 3
got it about right.
Was the right choice for sure. And we put out one now on streaming, which is like a sampler of the show that we do on Patreon. We put one out a week on streaming. So it technically can be 4 shows a week.
Right. And with the Patreon, you mentioned there were levels, so people pay different amounts. I mean, the cheapest is it's only like £2.50 or something, isn't it? It's really cheap to get in. We're not talking about big money here. But then there are different levels, and they go up quite high. What are the different tiers, and what do you get for your money on the different levels?
Bean?
Well, that's an Allie question because she runs all that.
No, I want you to explain it.
I don't even know it. We do.
He has no idea.
I know. This is all Allie's business. We're brand new to Patreon. We'd never done this before. And when I said we had no idea how many subscribers we could get, one of the reasons was there's so much free content on the internet. How are we going to expect people to pay for it? Even though it's 25 cents a show. That's the low level is $3 in America, Graham, which turns out to be 25 cents a quarter for a show, right?
Right.
We thought that's as low an entry point as there can be, and hopefully somebody will sign up for that. But then we put other tiers up that involve video and behind the scenes stuff. We do Zoom calls with subscribers where we, have basically 2-on-1 phone calls with them. We do a thing called a crowdcast once a month where very various tiers get to interact like this, exactly like this, and we play games, and we usually get between 200 and 300 people for that. So behind the scenes videos, if I didn't mention that, we just look for other content for people who just want to know more about it. We do I put together a playlist every week. I'm a big music head, as you know, Graham. A playlist every month and put that out for subscribers. So just little bits and pieces here and there.
You did very well, Bean. I was looking along at what our tiers are. That was shockingly impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just amazing to me that anyone's paying for it, but we're, knock on wood, they keep doing it and we appreciate it.
So who was the driving force behind starting it then?
Blondie.
What are you pointing at? Okay.
I'm trying to point at you. What? I don't know if it looks that way, but
very strange because I don't even know where you're looking right now. You're looking to the side while we're looking to the front. It's all very strange.
Tell Graham how I almost had to change my phone number, Allie, so that you would stop texting me about doing a podcast.
It's true. It is true.
You pushed him into it.
100%. Here's the thing. I have friends that do Patreon. One of my friends, Allie Ward, does a podcast called Ologies. So it's every certain, they talk about bugs, they talk about farts, she gets experts in to talk about these things. She started on Patreon 1 show a week and it took off. I mean, she was just killing it doing this Patreon. But more so than that, she talked about this community that it turns into of people that want to be there and want to listen to your show, want the interaction. They want to be a part of it. Something that on KROQ you could never do unless you went out to a meet and greet type of thing. But this is a daily basis where people can interact with you and we get to talk to people all the time. And I pitched it to Bean. And when Bean doesn't want to do something, he changes the subject. A lot like every man watching this right now. So he'd be like, "Oh, so what are you doing out there? What's lockdown like?" And I'm like, "All right, we're going to leave it alone." And then a month and a half later, I'd be like, "So this Patreon thing, I mean, we could do it 3 times a week. I could do it for my house. You could, oh yeah, you think about getting a dog yet? Like what's going on out there?" Okay. All right. Not yet. And then I got a text from Bean that basically said, "Listen, Donna said I need to do a podcast with you before you find someone else. So do you want to talk about it?" And I was like, thank God for Donna, as usual. Donna is, of course, Bean's lovely bride of how many years? 30?
Just 30.
30 years. Yeah. So she knows Bean and probably was seeing him getting a little bored, probably seeing him annoying her quite a bit more than usual. Maybe have something to do for a few hours a day type of thing. And that's how it happened. I think in September, you finally said, all right, let's talk about it. And we launched October 12th.
So you'd been away from the USA about a year then, Bean, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, about a year. I mean, my plan, Graham, as you and I have spoken about, and I think I've mentioned this on our podcast as well, my plan in moving home to the UK was to get work in British radio. That's what I thought I would do, is I would leave my American radio job and get something here. For a number of reasons, that hasn't worked out. But I still love communication. I still love radio. This is like radio. Let's face it. I mean, we're not on an FM transmitter, but we're still entertaining. We're still doing a show, right?
Yeah.
So I missed it. I got to the point, a few months went by. Yeah, it's fun after getting up for so many years doing a morning show. It was nice to have a little bit of time off. I did enjoy that.
Except there was a pandemic. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it wasn't the greatest time in the world to move to a new continent, that's for sure. But at some point, I actually missed it. And I always had fun whenever I either talked to Allie or texted with Allie. It was always entertaining to me. I mean, I enjoyed it and I thought, hey, I can do more of that. Sure, why not? So, we didn't have, like I said, we had no expectations going in. We were both professionals and we both, we do the show at a rigid time every single week and take care of all of our business and do everything. It's just a 2-person operation, but it's really been fairly seamless. I mean, we've had a little growing pains here and there, but in general, it's working out way better than we ever thought it would. And it's still super fun and we're getting great reaction to it. So we press on.
And Allie, is it just the same as working at KROQ? Because he wasn't even in the studio there anyway. So What's the difference?
That's what everybody says. Is it basically the same thing? Because somebody, Jimmy Pardo, who we are good friends with, Never Not Funny podcast, brilliant guy. He was like, "Wait, you guys don't do this over Zoom? You don't look at each other while you're doing the show?" No. Why would we do that? We've never looked at each other ever during a show. So it works out. Of course, Graham, you're sitting there with your lovely stuff to the side. What's that cushioning called? Soundproofing.
Yeah.
If you've listened to our podcast, we get to know my trash men. We get to know my gardeners. We get to know the birds outside. And I know it's gotten bad because I got a text from Bean about 2 weeks ago. Hey, Graham just got all of this stuff for his house. It's really working out great for him. And I was like, where in my living room would you like me to put sound?
Well, this is what you would call a closet where we are now. So you could, you could hide away in the wardrobe,
Where would I put my clothes, Graham?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this just in. I'm a lady. Yeah. But it's been a real joy. It has been a real joy doing this. And God bless Donna for finally saying, listen, you should really think about doing this. Because we've had a blast. October 12th is when we started. And it just, for me, it's been the biggest blessing during COVID times because I have something to look forward to. I laugh so hard working with Bean, and it's truly a joy.
It's sweet. Hey, Graham, can I'm sitting on this. I got to ask you this question.
Sure. There's no rules on this, by the way. Yeah, sure.
You and I have both transitioned after long radio careers into the world of podcasting, and I'm just curious from your perspective. And by the way, Graham's made another transition. He's doing audiobooks now, and he's done dozens and dozens and dozens of those.
48 audiobooks.
Something he'd never done before either. So we're all, as the industry has changed, we're all pivoting to other things. What were your thoughts about podcasting and maybe doing a podcast before all this happened, before the world changed? I thought ever been interested in? Were you a listener of podcasts? Because now you do one. You're an actual podcaster.
Yeah, it was something I had, like, my people who I listened to, but I came to podcasting almost through California Aircheck, because I would listen to air checks of mostly American broadcasters on cassette. And then when the internet started come along with the dial-up internet, and some shows were streamed, and some shows ran their best of shows or just ran their whole show on their website, and you could download it. It was tricky to do. But then after a while, some of them, and I think probably the first one was Kid Craddock in Dallas, he turned his into a podcast. And I was like, okay, so that's a podcast. So then I'd listen to his radio. I was listening to radio shows as podcasts first, and then you expand and listen to other people, and then people who lose radio shows like Adam Carolla, who was on your show, as he was on Kevin and Bean show. He then turned his thing into a podcast, and so I kind of my view of podcasting was it was radio just in a different way. It was just a different way of getting that same audio entertainment from the same personalities you like listening to from other places, because I was listening to stuff from out of market from where I lived anyway. So that was kind of how I came to it. But it seems like it's really opened up now, because who knows how many podcasts there are. You just can't keep counting. It's totally democratized broadcasting.
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, we are just like we're in the golden age of content on television with Disney Plus and Apple Plus and Netflix and all the other people who are making great content. It's like that with podcasts. I mean, Allie, what was the figure we talked about? How many podcasts were started in 2020? Wasn't it 800 and something thousand?
It was an obscene number. I didn't even think it was possible.
It was over 800,000 new podcasts started in 2020, Graham. So again, there's something out there for everybody. It is the golden age of content. And, it's just the question now is just, how do you get the word out? How do you let people know you exist?
That's the trick.
Yeah, discovery is certainly at the top of the list of what all of us podcasters need to figure out how to do. And that's one area where Allie and I have kind of struggled a little bit we don't know how to get the word out. I mean, we have our
5,000
own
subscribers would probably disagree with that, though, wouldn't they?
Well, I mean, and God bless them. They, they found out about us. But I mean, with the exception of our own social media, and Allie has a lot more followers there than I do. But with the exception of that, I don't know how to get the word out to people. There may be a ton of fans out there of Allie's, of mine, of the old Kevin and Bean show that have no idea that we're even doing this podcast, and we just need to figure out a way to, I don't know, evangelize people or do something to get the word out so they know we're here.
I think it'll get out there, because I see podcasting now as the next stage of evolution of audio entertainment. Because if you think about it, it started out with local radio stations that were full service. I mean, they even had like musicians in the studio, and they did everything: plays, news, entertainment. And then the next part of the evolution, once they were competing with TV for that kind of stuff, was the disc jockey playing records. And then the next, but he play a wide variety. You hear stories. I think I heard it was a lecture from, I think it was Scott Shannon was saying when he grew up listening to rock and roll radio in the 50s, you'd then hear like Dean Martin and Nat King Cole played on the same station that was playing Jerry Lee Lewis and Elvis and Chuck Berry. And so it went from like that full service to formatted. So you'd get your oldies on one, KROQ would be playing alternative rock, then top 40 on another station. And then it went, talk became, so people could pick and choose whatever mood they were in, or if they're in easy listening mood. And then it split again with like talk stations and the rise of talk radio. And then people could get their talk from here, their news from here, their music from here. Well, now podcasting has taken that even further by saying, well, if it's the personalities you like, well, now the personalities are out there on their own little thing, without the music, without the news. So I think it's just like the next natural stage of evolution. Rather than, I mean, it's massive, but rather than it being this thing that just came from nowhere, I think people should have seen it coming, because I was always a fan of personality radio, and I think it's now that this is what it is.
What do you think about how many celebrities are doing podcasts? And I know this last year was exceptional for many of them because their regular revenue streams dried up because they weren't making movies or TV shows or being able to go out on concerts. But I feel like every single day, if it's not Harry and Meghan announcing a podcast, it's, Minnie Driver or Will Ferrell or somebody. It just seems like everybody is into it now.
Yeah, and some of them are good and some of them not so good. But maybe they've got the gift of that awareness because they're already famous for something. But you guys are already famous for something, so that's the same thing, isn't it?
We're barely famous. I mean, we are the tiniest. We got to remember, radio is the lowest rung of the entertainment ladder, right? So we are way, way, way down here in terms of fame.
Yeah, well, it's still you're still known though. That's to be able to take a tribe that you mean to the people who you mean something to, you're more important than a big movie star or TV star because you mean something to them. So,
Allie, you were going to say, speak for yourself on the lower end of the entertainment ladder, weren't you?
I was going to say, listen, when you Google my name, you just see Allie McKay shake weight or Allie McKay milks a goat. Those are the two things you see of my news career. So, no, I was actually going to agree 100% with him.
Okay. Now, the podcast does take, though, a little bit of the vibe of Kevin and Bean. Like, for instance, you start with that wonderful montage of sound bites. Was that deliberate, that you were gonna tap into some of the things that made the old show successful?
That's a great question. We didn't have a format in mind when we started. We didn't know how long we were going to go. We didn't know what segments we were going to do. We knew that we didn't want to try to recreate the radio show. We knew there were people that would have expected that, and that's not something either of us were interested in. We're not trying to reclaim past glories or anything like that. We wanted to create our new universe and do new stuff. But when you get started with something, you have a certain skill set that you're comfortable with. And I love sound, and I always have. And I always, as long as I've been in radio, have collected audio, and I love putting it together.
How many sound bites you got now?
I don't know, around 50,000, I think. I think around 50,000. Allie will remember this, that when I was off the air for all those months, I didn't have a show. but I still was collecting sound as if I did. And when we decided to start doing this show, I said, well, I guess I better get them all labeled and cut up and put into my computer so we have access to them. And in that few months since I was off the air, I collected over 1,200 new ones. So yeah, a lot of sound. So to answer your question, it was something that I was comfortable with, that I thought I would enjoy doing, that the listeners would enjoy. We'll see how it goes. And yeah, it's fun. I certainly didn't invent that. There have been radio shows for a long time who have played a lot of sound bites and stuff, but it's one aspect of radio I really enjoy. There's nothing wrong with a podcast if people are interesting of them just sitting and having a chat, but I enjoy something that has a little bit of production value. If it's got some jingles, if it's got some, some audio, some different kinds of sounds and voices and music and things like that, I don't know, to me, it's just more fun to hear it all put together.
And Allie, has Bean changed since he moved to the UK?
I mean, he says schedule, which is insane to me. It's schedule.
He'll say maths too soon,
Maths, seriously. Which, by the way, Graham, you can answer this for me. We, of course, Bean's the bane of his existence has been people saying daylight savings time instead of daylight saving time here in America. There's no S, there shouldn't be. And I brought up to him, and I think it kind of blew his mind. I said, what are you in coming up in what, a week and a half? You're entering what?
British summertime. Yeah.
British summertime. Why is it not British summer's time? If you're so into S's at the end of stuff like maths, why is it not British summer's time? Can we make this a movement? Let's do this, guys.
I just read, Graham, about somebody giving or taking bloods. I can't remember which one it was, but it was giving or taking blood. Not bloods. And I thought, well, Allie's right about that S. We do love our S's.
We do.
Love your S's.
Our major supermarket here is called Tesco, but everybody calls it Tesco's.
Right.
So we love the S's.
We love the S's.
Yeah.
I don't think Bean has changed much. He's the same, really inappropriate, at times person. I think, what I do think maybe Bean is a little bit more of is sensitive to certain things. And I think he's definitely, I don't want to say our little boy has grown up, but I think he's not only more sensitive to certain things, he's more able to share that he's sensitive about certain things. I don't want to say vulnerable if that's not the word that he'd go for, but I think he's more open on this podcast than he ever was on Kevin and Bean.
Do you agree with that, Bean?
I think so. And I think it's for a couple of different reasons. One is this is a more intimate environment. It's just two people talking. It doesn't have the same feel of not that our show was really a wacky morning zoo type show, but it could feel like that sometimes. And it was easy to get mocked. There was a lot more being made fun of on that show from people. Allie's a lot more mature than some of the other people that we used to work with. And I think
that is terrifying.
It is terrifying. I think she's willing to have a more, again, I hate to keep overusing the word intimate, but I think she's able to have a more adult conversation without being dumb. You know what I mean? And I think part of it is just my worldview has changed a lot as a result of so many things that have happened in the last year and a half. This pandemic really makes you stop and think what's important in the world and what you have, how much you have to be grateful for. And like anybody else in the world, I've been deeply affected by the Me Too movement. I've been deeply affected by the Black Lives Matter movement. I'm right now deeply affected by the conversation that's going on in the UK about women's safety. I mean, those sorts of things, I think the world is getting a lot better at addressing those issues that have been problems in society for so long. And I'm like any other citizen who's learning and growing as I go. And I think that makes me a better human and also a better broadcaster.
Now, you're either side of the Atlantic when you do the podcast. Have you touched on the Markle debacle?
We didn't fully agree after seeing that interview. Are you able to show us your tattoo for anyone who's not seen the tattoo? They may have heard about the tattoo.
Mack, everybody.
this could be the
Whoa.
time to see the tattoo, which could give what we're about to talk about a little bit of context. Maybe I'm not just. This is not gratuitous. Because this is in context of what we're talking about. Are you prepared to reveal the tattoo?
Well, first of all, sun's out, guns out, obviously. But second of all, you're talking about the tattoo on my penis, right? That's the one you're asking.
No, that's not the one I'm thinking about. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You think that this is going to affect how I feel about it, but the reality is that.
Are we going to see the tattoo, though? Are we going to see the tattoo?
Honestly.
I'll show it to you. Yes. I love Queen Elizabeth. I do. I adore her. She has devoted her entire life to service, and I think she is I think she's a wonderful, wonderful woman who's done so much for England. But I don't really care that much about the rest of the royal family, Graham. So if you think that I'm going to be a royal apologist, I'm really not. I think they got a lot of problems. And I think the Queen is not completely absolved from some of those problems because she's the head of the firm. But I think a lot of what's been done dirty to Harry and Meghan doesn't have anything to do with the Queen. All right, let me show you the thing here.
Okay. All right. So let's see. This is it.
Where do I have to go?
There it is. There you go. That's
right
it.
there.
The wrong way, I think. Can you see it at all? Or?
Really struggling. Yes, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Okay, good. All right,
Okay.
you saw it.
And why is that there?
Why do I have a tattoo of the Queen?
Yes.
Why is that there?
Because this was before you moved to the UK. It wasn't like you were trying to suck up.
Right, but it was after I was born a British citizen in London, England. Okay.
Yeah, but you didn't get it till, well, it was only a few years ago you got that, wasn't it?
Right. Well, and I'll tell you why. Because when my father, R.I.P., was still alive, he had very few pieces of advice for his children, but one of them is, essentially, I'll disown you if you get a tattoo. Don't ever get a dirty tattoo, which is weird because my dad was in the Navy. You would think that he would have been, used to tattoos, right? He thought tattoos on anyone for any reason, no matter how tasteful or how discreet, were just an abomination. And he's like, it was almost like he said, if you ever cared about me, do this one thing for me and promise that you'll never get a tattoo. So I had to wait till he passed, which was just a couple of years ago. And then a few months after
Body
that,
wasn't even cold and he's making the call. It was disgusting.
And when I went on the air and announced that I had decided to get a tattoo, Allie, nobody believed me. Like, you have to admit, nobody thought that I would actually go through with it.
No, because Bean does these things where he says, this is what I'm going to do. And it becomes this joke and it's fun, like learning to play the ukulele.
How dare you?
Changed. But a lot of things that he says, he never follows through with. So we started having world-renowned tattoo artists call in, talk to Bean. Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I'm going for. He wound up settling on a gentleman named Nico Hurtado, who is one of the best in the world. You can tell by looking at
it's a fine tattoo. Yeah.
Stunning. So he was very lucky that he made room for him because we called Nico Hurtado. Turned out he was a Kevin and Bean listener from a very young age and wound up getting the tattoo. And I'm not going to lie to you, I went to see him get it. And until I was in the room watching him get it, I was like, he's not going to do it. He's going to just leave. He's not going to do it. And then there it was, ink going right into the skin. I was proud of our Bean.
It took 5.5 hours, I think. It was all done in one session because Nico was leaving the next day for a tattoo convention in Australia. It was really lucky. It was such a limited window that we were able to get him. I mean, this is a guy who's booked up a year in advance, essentially, for tattoos. I mean, he does The Rock and he does Travis Barker and he does all these people, right? So I was so grateful to have my first tattoo be put on me by somebody who's so talented. And you don't want to screw it up. You don't want something on your body that looks bad either. But
you don't want
I
the
don't know.
queen with a wonky eye,
Right. When I got my jab, Graham, when I went down for my first dose of the vaccine last week, Donna was like, actually, Allie asked this on the podcast. She's like, "You're gonna put the shot in her face?" And I'm like, I don't like the way you said that.
I think I might have
offended.
even said, "You're gonna jab that bitch in the face." So I apologize, everyone from the UK. I apologize.
I'm not doing that to Her Majesty. But I just, I've admired her my entire life. So what better? And I also looked at it that, they always say, be very careful about getting a real live person tattooed. Next thing you know, you got Bill Cosby. You got Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
You got fill in the blank of things that can go wrong. I felt fairly confident, and I think I said this at the time, that the Queen wasn't going to be in any N-word controversies or anything like that. I felt like I was going to be safe with her. She's 95 years old, for God's sakes, right? So I've been really happy with it.
So where did that leave you? Have you had a discussion on the podcast about the Meghan Markle situation and Prince Harry?
Yeah, I mean, after we saw it, in America, they got it on Sunday. For whatever reason, we couldn't get it till Monday night. But as soon as we had both seen it, we had the discussion. And I think we were both fairly spirited about it, but we didn't 100% agree on everything. Allie, what was your take? I know you were ready to go to war for the family, right?
I was taking off my earrings, my shoes. I was ready to fight for Harry and Meghan. I think they were wronged. I think they continue to be wronged by the British press, by that asshole over there, Piers Morgan, who's still yapping. How is he still yapping? Who's giving this man a platform? It is shocking to us Americans.
There are 20 cameras in his front yard every morning just waiting for him to come out and talk.
They need to stop doing that because no one wants to hear from him, except
Allie,
a lot of people.
Good Morning Britain has lost 500,000 viewers since he left.
I mean, he was a polarizing figure, but he was entertaining to watch. And I agreed with virtually nothing he ever said. Still, I think they've killed the goose that laid the golden egg there with that show. I just don't think that's a show now. It's rubbish.
Yeah.
That weatherman, though, smoking hot. What about him? I mean, I'm just saying, the dude is a babe. Why not put him next to Susanna, I believe is her name. I know a lot about Good Morning Britain. Oh, yes.
So overall then, Bean, did you make the right move to move back to Britain?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think some of what we were excited about has been put on hold, obviously, but I'm delighted to be here. I wish I had been able to spend more time seeing my family. I have aunts and uncles and lots of cousins and people that I love that I'd love to be able to see more. I haven't been able to do much of that. Haven't been able to make those little trips around the countryside, to go to Devon and go to Cornwall and go to Brighton, all the places. I want to get up to Scotland. We have friends there we're dying to see. So a lot of the stuff we thought we'd be enjoying now in my semi-retirement, we haven't been able to do. I'm real happy to be here. And although I don't say it much, a lot of the luster of America kind of faded during the Trump years as well. I was ready for my own mental health to kind of get out from being inside of that. It just, it wasn't a healthy place to be. It didn't feel good. So I was happy to, not that we have a perfect system over here. You can certainly have lots of complaints about Boris, but I was glad to move away from that administration for sure. So I think it was the right move for me, and I'm happy to be here.
And the podcast is called A Cup of Tea and a Chat with Allie and Bean. What's next then? Where does it go from here? Do you Allie, will you be moving to Britain next? Or
listen, to any lovely man in the UK watching, I come from a long line of Scottish people. Allie Mackay is how you're supposed to pronounce my last name, but then you sound like a pirate here in America. My mother is an O'Neill from Ireland. So I'm more than willing to hop on a plane and change my whole life. But a lot like American men, not a lot of calls. But, we'll see. I mean, I am looking forward to the day when I can hop on a plane and go back to England and visit with Bean and Donna. I can't wait for that. Bean will, of course, not open the door. Hopefully Donna will, but I'm excited for that. Absolutely. Who knows? Who knows?
Allie's talking about
OnlyFans?
Allie's talking about leaving Los Angeles finally. She's talking about moving to Maine. So many people around the world have realized during the pandemic that there's no reason to live in a big, expensive city. If you can do your work online, why not live someplace you want to be, in the country for some people or on the water for other people? But Allie's explained that everybody else is having the same idea. So good luck finding a property you can afford.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a seller's market right now in America. So kind of have to wait a year for that bubble to burst and see how that goes.
To be blunt, though, I mean, let's face it, Bean, you moved over to the UK to look for radio work, and that hasn't happened yet. And Allie, you were on KROQ until the whole show got fired. Mm-hmm. Is the worst thing that could happen to the podcast that one of you could get a job? Well, like I said, I'm being blunt here.
How dare you verbalize my biggest fear about Bean?
Wait, hold on. I have a way out? Are you kidding me? I didn't even think about it like that.
Bean, I'll say this. My father said 2 weeks ago when we were talking about me building a house in Maine and what about that and da-da-da, he goes, let's say you do that, you move out here and Bean gets a full-time job and he says, screw that chick. What are you going to do? And I'm like, wow. Yikes. Didn't really think about that. So Bean, while we have you, what are your plans? What's going on?
Well, I didn't realize I had a lifeline until Graham just threw it to me. So I'm feeling the most optimistic I felt in years right now. I'll tell you what I'll do is double down on finding some work, man. That's for sure.
Well, I mean, I say it because from my own personal experience, I used to do a daily radio show and then I ran a radio station in London and I was there every day. Since the pandemic and things have happened, now I do a weekly radio show and I do other bits and pieces on another station and I do the audiobooks. And I kind of think now if somebody was to offer me a daily radio show, I'd really have to think twice about taking it.
Right? Right?
Yeah, because, because of all the idiots you have to work with and you have to be at a certain place. And I was just wondering, because this is a successful podcast very, very quickly, whether it'd be hard to even tempt you back to a real job.
I have no plans to leave the podcast. The podcast is something that, I'm proud like any entrepreneur would be. I mean, Allie and I together, just the two of us, have built a business. And I'm really proud of that. And I enjoy it and I feel good about it. And I feel like it would be unfair to our wonderful subscribers to start this thing, get them all excited about thinking they've got a new thing in their life and then pulling the rug out from under them. So we don't have an end date on this. We've got a ... It's still further notice. And as far as I'm concerned, it's going to last a while.
Well, it's sounding great and I really enjoy it. And I'm glad you're back together on the air and everyone can enjoy the chemistry between the two of you. And the things you talk about. And where can we find out more?
Well, we're on Patreon, of course. A Cup of Tea and a Chat is the name of the podcast. But as Allie mentioned, we also have a free weekly sampler that comes out every Monday through all the usual places, through your Stitcher and through your Spotify and through your Apple and everybody. It'll kind of give you a flavor of the show. We just cut up some of our favorite bits from the previous week. So people want to check it out and then decide if they want more content, they can get it from the Patreon page. And anybody who hasn't, I doubt there's anyone watching this who hasn't already listened. But if you're out there, check us out. We'd love to have you in the audience. You too could be called a teabagger.
That's what you're calling your listeners, teabaggers.
I wasn't all for teabaggers. I thought mad shatters would be delightful. But the more I thought about people listening being called teabaggers, the funnier it became.
Before you whisk us away here, Graham, Allie, did I tell you that Graham is such a professional? Like, who is better at interviewing than Graham Mack?
I will tell you this, Graham Mack. It speaks to how good you are because Bean barely switched into interview mode with you. Usually, no matter who he is talking with, he's like, so let me ask you a few questions. And the person's like, what just happened? So that speaks to you for sure, Graham. Thank you for having us.
When I consider how little Graham knows about us and even more so how little he cares about us, the fact that he was able to put on this brave face for an hour and make it sound like he was interested, the man, he deserves a BAFTA. I'll tell you that.
I cared deeply, Bean. I've been listening to you since I first got into radio when I was listening to you on cassettes on California Air Check. And it's been a real thrill to do this with you. And you're going to be my guest in 2 weeks' time. We'll take the audio track from this and turn it into some nice segments. And then over the next few weeks, you'll keep popping up on podcast radio. The show is called The Pod 20. It goes out at 5 p.m. on a Sunday, GMT, Graham Mack time, which is whatever time it is, wherever you are. And they also repeat it over the weekend, and it becomes a podcast itself, but not anywhere near as successful as A Cup of Tea and a Chat with Allie and Bean.
Thank you, Graham. I can't wait till we can get together in person again when this nonsense is all over.
We really enjoyed it. And you too, when you're in the country as well, Allie, we should get together and we should do something, the three of us. It'd be fun.
I would love that, Graham.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks to the teabaggers. We got to 235 still watching. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll see you on the podcast on Friday. Bye-bye.